this is it. Dope from the fly kid. The ice mic is back with the high bit. Suckers, you lost, the players, you're not. Gangsters, you ain't. You faint punk if you ever heard a gunshot. Yo, the pusher, the player, the pimp, gangster, the hustle.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm here with Danny Padden once again. He was on last summer with Alec Berry and Will Wallace.
Yeah.
And what was the name of the dance party you guys had last night?
So last night was
Was it Trunk?
was Factory.
Factory, that's right. I knew it was one word like that.
Yeah. So that's like probably the fifth or sixth party that we've had it later, and they've been kind of steady. And with Mitch running later now, he's kind of he's open to all of my dumb ideas, and
yeah, I think it's a great idea. It's the kind of parties that something that otherwise you'd have to go to Pittsburgh or someplace like that. I think that.
Yeah, they were just kind of born out of necessity because, prior to those, to hear something like that, you'd have to stay home and listen to it on records,
right,
or, go to Pittsburgh. And that's kind of getting bored on Friday or Saturday nights and going up to the city and meeting people up there is what has made those possible, because the DJ is from Pittsburgh. Last night there were 4 of the Get Down Gang, which is Stealth's breakdancing crew.
Nice.
They came with him, and a couple of them have come in the past, but I think it's great that they're there because they dance from the moment they get there, and I think it makes the people that are coming in a little bit less nervous to just move around a little bit.
It is funny. It's kind of still like high school when you go to a dance, and I mean we're pretty far apart in age, but I know when we would have the dances, you'd walk in the gym and everybody be standing around, nobody dance until a few people got out there.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
you got a couple people to get the party started.
Yeah.
In fact, my friend Trish, she worked for a DJ for a while that did weddings, and her job was just to go and get people to dance, and she would grab people that looked like they kind of wanted to dance, and she'd dance with them, and she'd be the first one out on the dance floor. And people need that, but I'm sure once they get going, I've heard from several people that they talk about how much fun they have at those parties.
Yeah, last night was probably the best turnout we've had this year, just because the weather has not been cooperative at all this year. It's like if I pick a date, it's going to rain on that day, at least at some portion of the day. But last night was good. I think maybe 60 people.
Wow.
And, by the middle of the party, it seemed like everybody had, kind of lost that wallflower inhibition. And at least we're talking to each other. That's, half the excitement, too, is to, break down a lot of cliques, I guess.
Yeah.
And just get people that would not normally have a conversation to run into each other.
That is really important. I know meeting some of the local hip hop guys and knowing a lot of the musicians, I always thought it would be great to get more of those shows where you had a punk band and a hip hop band and maybe even an acoustic folk band, and have everybody playing the same night. And that night they had hip hop down at Third Fridays. That was great to have that mixing of people that don't normally hang out together.
Yeah, I talked to Ron Scott recently, and he's got a hip hop event kind of in the works for February of next year. So that'll be exciting because that's first and foremost probably my favorite genre of music, and the reason that I've even met some of these people from Pittsburgh and brought them here. And I think it's sort of probably I don't want to say underdeveloped, but not showcased here so much, compared to, if you have, especially a metal band in the Ohio Valley, they seem to have always had a home, even post yesterday's 1056, when that disbanded, they went to McMecken, right?
Yeah.
So that's always had a scene. If you have a folk rock band, we've all heard of you. And that's great, but as far as hip-hop, I think it never really had or at least from my experience, has not had a footing here so much.
And it is funny because speaking of metal, we have some amazing metal bands in the Valley, which for a guy that likes music like I do, I had no idea until I met Corey Roth and
Right.
Mike Graham, and I started going to see Appalachian Underground and
Yeah, those guys
Brimstone
go
Coven.
really way back. Like, Mikey, I think, is maybe 4 or 5 years older than me, but he was in a band when I was in high school, and I didn't know him then, but that was like the high watermark for emo and like
Yeah.
pop punk, I guess. And they were in this band called Sarah's Victoria with Petey Miller, who lives down the street here.
Nice.
And actually, I think I could be totally wrong, but I think Ty Thorngate was like the lead singer. And they had like a decent following and did shows around here and were relatively popular. And, you know, that obviously, that scene sort of died down, but Mikey's still been doing music all that time. And Corey has always been doing music. And yeah, Appalachian Underground, I saw them at, I can't pronounce, it's a Greek bar in St. Clairsville.
Oh, Nicholas Axe.
Yeah. So that was my first time seeing them, and Evan Smith is on guitar for them.
Yep.
And I've known Evan for years and years. He's phenomenal. Guitarist even before he went to West Liv, and then it just seemed like that experience in college kind of just broadened his genres and his skill level.
Yeah.
So seeing them in that tiny little podunk bar in St. Clairsville, like they had a lot of power, and Mikey's always had some really wild guitar riffs, and I'm not by any means an expert on playing guitar, but I can recognize when like somebody's doing something pretty insane. So that was I haven't seen them since. I would like to go again, but that was a great show. And it was cool to hear something other than, you know, once again, like a country band or some folk rock thing. And
Yeah. I had met Corey, and he said, come down and check out a show. And I was just impressed at the level of skill that they were all performing at. And, he's incredible musician, and he goes, I'm playing drums with Appalachian Underground, and I've seen guitar players play drums before, and they're okay, but he was probably as good a drummer as anybody I've seen, and the songs that they were playing were so fast that I was completely impressed with everything that they did, and the crowds are very loyal, and then the hip hop shows that I've been to, which haven't been many, but I went to the Hip Hop Awards a couple of years with Ron and Poetic Path. That guy, he's incredible.
Yeah, I've seen videos of him, so I'm hoping that he is involved. I have not met him in person. I'm hoping he's involved for what Ron has, in the pipeline for February. And there's also this, I think he's from Steubenville, this guy, Skinny Red, who Ron has kind of worked with in the past, and I finally got to check out some of his music on YouTube, and he raps on a Dilla beat, which, if you're remotely into like, I don't even want to call it underground hip hop, but just kind of the traditional hip hop kind of formula, Jay Dilla is pretty much legendary, and it was cool that he did that sort of beat in an era now where it seems like that the trap sound is kind of where people kind of gravitate to, where with the really fast hi-hat. So the Dilla beat was really cool. He was incredible. He's very lyrical. That's kind of what I look for in hip hop. I'm not that I dislike your classic like gangster rap or talking about getting money. It's really great on the way to work.
Yeah.
But just as far as like something fresh, that's kind of what I get excited about.
See, my introduction to hip hop was Run DMC, Beastie Boys, and then Public Enemy and Ice-T and NWA, and it was gangster rap, but at least NWA. But Public Enemy was probably my all-time favorite hip hop band, and there was a lot to learn from the lyrics, and it was very poetic, and when I hear some of the newer hip hop stuff in my gym, and I think, I could probably make up these words. There's
Yeah.
whereas I think for a Public Enemy song, it would be three pages from a legal pad, and now it's like maybe half a paragraph of,
Yeah, they're saying the same things.
But people like it, I guess. But it's not necessarily for me.
Right. I kind of owe most of my knowledge or enthusiasm for hip hop to Ralph and Chad Kresovic, who, if you haven't met them, they both work at Later Gator now. But I met Chad in high school through a mutual friend, and I was just starting to skateboard, and Ralph and Chad were kind of known for that. And Ralph especially was kind of a hip hop head and actually digs records and makes beats and stuff like that. But they introduced me to Gang Starr and Tribe Called Quest and De La, and very importantly, this was like a turning point album for me. But there's a group called it, and they're not together anymore to my knowledge, but it's Little Brother, and they did this album called The Minstrel Show. It was like their second album, and it was sort of like I kind of want to call it like a hip hop version of a rock opera. They do these little skits in between tracks, but there were 3 or 4 songs on that album that were really like eye-opening to me. And Ninth Wonder was the producer on that album, and he samples a lot of old soul tracks that I couldn't tell you what the source was, but you can feel it.
Yeah.
And those guys, for me, that kind of was like the snowball effect from there. After getting into Little Brother,
I miss the days of sampling when they would take the old Aretha Franklin and James Brown records.
Rest in peace, Aretha.
Yeah, and other completely obscure records that you've never heard of, and find those beautiful little clips and work them in. When I saw the hip hop show at Third Fridays, it was Chance. I guess he goes by Chance. Walter. I know him from Walter because he was at one point in time we were looking at him to act in one of our movies.
Okay.
And I just seen him walking down the street. I could tell he's got to be a performer, and he just had that flash and pizzazz, and he put on this high energy show. And there was probably 5 or 6 people on stage with him. And then Patrick came up next, and he was by himself, and he was really smart about it. Because, I mean, you can't really follow somebody like Chance. It was that much energy and that many people. So he just sat on the stool. And he went the complete opposite direction. And
right.
He did like a cappella, something that he had written for his grandma, and totally brought the crowd back to him. And I was really impressed with both of them that night. So the level of metal, hip hop, and of course the different punk bands and stuff that we have around here. It's pretty impressive for Little Wheeling, West Virginia. I like to see more actual punk rock. That's kind of was my thing from back in the day, and even just more original, like more heavier rock stuff. That's kind of my background. But at this point, I think I'm too old to do another rock band.
I mean, maybe you could promote them or something, though.
Yeah.
It would be. I would totally not be opposed to having like a Bad Brains party.
Oh, absolutely. I think if one of the things that any music scene needs is a club, like you said, the metal scene, they always kind of find that home. And there's a couple places now for the folk rock, alternative rock bands. They play Gator. They play it down on Main Street.
Yeah, and you were at Concrete TP's last show.
Yeah.
That was like the most excited I've ever gotten for them. They were really, I don't know what it was about that show, but it was like they were very, very tight and lots of energy, and the crowd liked it. And even being outside where, your noises are bouncing off buildings and everything, they sounded really great. And I remember like looking at Alec and being like, man, like, and he just nodded his head and he was like, this is phenomenal. Like, this is great. So it's kind of exciting to see the town kind of progressing that way.
They wrote a bunch of new songs and kind of played around with the lineup a little bit. I know that ever since the launch party for Bridge and Tunnel, they kind of went into a new direction, and I've always been really impressed with Kyle as a guitar player, and he'd come over to my house every now and then. We jammed down in my basement, and God, I wished I was a little bit younger, had more time.
Yeah, sure.
It's not even a matter of age, just had more time and could steal them away from Concrete Teepee, because I really love playing with them, and I'm hoping that Brown Bear will be reuniting in some form sometime soon.
I heard rumors.
I've heard rumors too.
That would be really cool.
Yeah.
Will had expressed sort of an interest in, and maybe I shouldn't say this too soon, but I think if he could get Brown Bear or talk them into doing a show, I think Will had expressed some interest in hosting it.
It is garage.
Yeah, kind of their return. Because I've seen some great Brown Bear shows, and probably the best local show I saw at yesterday's, or maybe it was 1056 at the time, was Touch Club. So that was like pre-Brown Bear.
Yeah.
Those, I think a lot of those same dudes though. And that was, I just remember that night being really, really fun, and that band being kind of unique for the area.
Yeah.
So yeah, shout out Sparky, come back to the limelight, I guess.
Yeah, he was actually at the Concrete
Yeah,
TV
I said
show.
what's up to him.
Hands down, Richard Herndon is my favorite guitar player in the High Valley. Not taking anything away from anybody else, but he just, first of all, when you talk to him about guitar, he takes it really seriously. He's a very dedicated musician, but he does some things tonally with the guitar that it's not just playing the right notes, but there's a whole feel thing that I can dig when he's playing. I did almost freeze sometimes
Sure.
when I listen to him. He's that connected, and so I do hope that at some point they come back in some form. As far as the parties, I think it's just great that you guys take a chance to do things like that, because when you come up with an idea like that, you don't really know if it's going to work or not.
Right, and I mean, I've definitely had sort of doubts as far as you do the promotion for the party, you do the Facebook page. In the past, we've done flyers, which I've found to be pretty inconclusive as far as like,
Yeah.
I don't recall ever handing somebody a flyer and then seeing them at the party later.
Right.
So you do that sort of prep, and you make sure that as far as the music and like the content that you're presenting is concerned, that's all really, really quality. And then that first hour of the party happens, and without fail, like every time, I'm like, wow, this is a bust. Like, nobody's going to show up.
Yeah.
And there's only really been one that kind of fell through, and that was because it started raining right before the party was supposed to go on, and we moved the location last minute just to kind of try to salvage things. And I think, people were uncomfortable with that, or they're so used to coming to later to hear this thing that, oh wait, we're going where? I've never heard of that. So I think I told Stealth, in the future, hey, we're sticking to the script. Like, we do things at later, and actually this fall, once it's too cold to do things in the courtyard, we have at least one party set up for Will's Garage in East Wheeling.
Nice.
That'll be kind of a bring your own beer thing, but it has sort of a similar aesthetic to Later's courtyard. It does have a courtyard with like vines growing in the back.
Yeah.
Behind the garage. The garage is massive. It's heated, and there's sort of a modular quality to it where you can make it look a certain way, and then you could tear that down, and the next party it look like something else.
Right.
So I'm kind of excited for that, and it's nice to not have to just kind of shut things down until spring, and naturally when spring comes back, we go back to Later Gator. But because Mitch has been very, very, more than welcoming, and open to, the weird names that I want to call the parties, or hey, let's do less soul and more hip hop, and he's good with that. So
Yeah, they do some interesting programming. They did the Bad Dad joke competition. They do the beers and bards, and
it seems like that gets a huge following.
yeah,
Like, who would have thought?
yeah.
But
He takes a chance on different things, and I think it's even. I didn't do any this summer, but last summer I did a lot of podcasts from back there on the deck. He said, "Yeah, go ahead. Why not?" And to a certain extent, you got to try different things and see what goes of it and appeal to different crowds. I think the fact that if you got, how many people did you say? 60 people?
yeah.
If you get 60 people on a Saturday night to come out and do anything, that's pretty impressive anymore. When I was in my 20s, we didn't have, we didn't have the internet. Video games weren't nothing worth staying in for.
Right.
There was no communication via social media, so getting people to go out and do things wasn't that difficult. Half the houses didn't have decent air conditioning, and it was like just a burgeoning era of cable TV. So
today's battle, I guess, like, my greatest competition is everyone's living rooms.
Yeah, Netflix.
Like, why should I leave? And when the weather's on your side, it kind of helps, but definitely in the wintertime, I think, and I've done it too, it's easy to get into this like hibernation state.
Sure.
Where I'm going to work on my projects in the garage, and I'm going to, watch this 12-part series about serial killers or something like that.
Yeah.
That seems popular now. I don't know, but
I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. It is though. It's just easier to stay at home, and once you get out there, you realize you had a good time, and you're glad you went. But that it's just much more convenient. Oh, I'm in the middle of Game of Thrones, and the next episode's coming on, or whatever.
Yeah.
Show you're binge watching. You're like, oh, that's right, that party's tonight. Or I could just stay here and watch this. So I think it.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, and I'm not necessarily criticizing it, I guess, because I've been there before, but I would definitely argue that if you make it to 80 years old and you look back, you're not going to remember, like, the nights that you hung out at home.
Absolutely.
And
I think it's really cool that you guys are providing those kind of nights for people that they will remember, and maybe make some new friends that could even possibly change their life, and if nothing else, to have that experience, something to look forward to, and to have one of those really great nights that it isn't just
right.
watching Netflix. And the people that I've talked to that have gone to the parties, it's one of those things where it definitely was well worth their time to go, and they're really glad, and they're looking forward to the next one, and I think they'll only get bigger and bigger. 60 people in the back of Later Gator, that's a pretty good crowd.
It feels like a lot of people back there, especially like last night, because it rained a little bit before the event. That little kind of standing room alley he has towards the back, I killed the lights for back there because it was too slippery on the bricks.
Yeah.
And so when you had everybody kind of concentrated to one area, I was like, wow, 60 is kind of a lot, I guess, but this feels like more.
60 for that courtyard, yeah.
It was almost like, I looked at Stealth at one point, and I was like, man, if 5 more people come in, there's not going to be any room to dance. And he was like, that's a good problem to have. So that was, I've been humbled as far as, like, people giving it a shot. I'm happy to see that they'll kind of give my idea some legs and show up and at least try it. So that's kind of exciting.
Well, you've got a good reputation for delivering. In the past, when you do the parties, you do it right, and you're consistent, and people kind of do know what to expect. And I know, like, the New Year's Eve party was amazing. I can't remember that guy's name, but that was
Jared Stone.
Jared Stone at a mansion down there, and what's that considered?
That would be South Wheeling, I guess, and it's right across from the Cooey Bench building, which was, I guess, a department store at one, or maybe a furniture
store
place.
at one time. Yeah.
So, and yeah, Jared came out of necessity too, where we had lost, Alec and I were doing those later New Year's parties, and we lost the warehouse where we thought we were going to do it 2 years ago, and we were asking around on a Friday, and the party was going to be Sunday night. So really scrambling, and of all people, Brian Wilson said, "Hey, call this guy."
Yeah.
And he was talking to Alec when he said that. Alec got a hold of Jared. Jared was like, "Well, come check the place out. I'm for it." So Alec calls me at work on like a Friday afternoon, and he was like, "Yo," and I was like, "What are you excited about? I'm gonna have to let like all these people down." And he was like, "No, we're good. We got a spot." So we meet Jared. He doesn't know me from, the mailman, and he's like, "Yeah, bring your people." And I'm like, "Are you sure? Because this house is like, I feel like I should take my shoes off." And
yeah, it's beautiful.
And that house has some sort of background. You should probably put Jared on the podcast to really talk about it. But I think that it might have been a bank robber's house that he built for his side chick, basically.
Oh, wow.
And, obviously no expense was spared back then. That was like the Renaissance period of Wheeling, and that house reflects it. But, here we are. That was 2016. I think we did the first one.
Yeah.
And we're just partying in the attic. So, yeah, he was very welcoming. And I've known him for like 2 years now, and I people ask me, what does Jared do for a living that he got this house? I have no idea.
Yeah.
And I don't ask.
Yeah.
I'm just happy that he'll have us, and those parties end up always being pretty exciting, and I think the location is probably half of it.
Yeah. It when you walk in, well, what I liked about it is because in case anybody doesn't really understand what we're talking, it's a very old house, very fancy, and he spent a lot of time trying to restore it back to the way it used to be. And there's just some really nice features, and it's for lack of a better word, it has a lot of opulence. And you walk in, you're like, oh, this is where I'm spending my New Year's Eve. And then you go upstairs, and there's this big room that's just painted white, and there's a DJ up there and lights and everything. So it's almost like a club on the third floor, and then just this big opulent mansion that you didn't really expect to walk into.
Right.
And it immediately changes your mood being in a place like that that's so cool. And it kind of, everybody wants New Year's Eve to be a special, the big special night, and celebrating it in that place. And then that and the Gator parties and the other parties they do, what it ultimately ends up being about is just bringing people together, like you said, and happy people all mingling together at
Sure.
the same time. And heck, I ran into a couple doctors from work at the New Year's Eve party.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
And I think that's lacking, because of Facebook and that need for human interaction. And you kind of kick it old school, because I know last summer I was here the night before a drift party or a drift event. So you had a party, and it was all these cars were lined up down the street, and as odd as it sounds, and I don't hear about, maybe because I'm older, but I don't hear about those kind of parties really happen. When I was younger, every weekend it seemed like there was a party on Saturday before you went to the bar at somebody's house in the afternoon, at least every other weekend. And I don't see that happening as much anymore. But then again, maybe I'm out of the loop.
As far as I know, it doesn't happen because, I remember Saturdays in college or whatever, you just kind of waited until 9 o'clock so that you could go out and see people and do things. But other than that, it was kind of quiet.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been, like I said, I've been kind of humbled and impressed by how many people show up to these things, and maybe they're having like the same sentiments that I'm having as far as, I like just getting everybody in the same room.
Yeah. And I
absolutely hate Facebook. As much as I use it for the parties, and it's kind of a necessary evil, I've basically unfollowed everyone, even like friends and family, because I just, you end up scrolling through these comment threads and then just finding out that people are kind of nasty to each other, where they otherwise wouldn't be in real life. And it's sort of like, have you ever noticed that on the highway in traffic or something, that's the only time you ever experience people, like, you know, complete strangers being so rude to each other in terms of road rage, whereas like if you kind of bumped into each other in the grocery store with your carts, it's like everybody falls all over themselves to get out of the way and to be polite, whereas as soon as you get in your little safe bubble of your, you know, your RAV4, you get to be a dick to everyone. So, and I think Facebook is kind of the same phenomenon. Everybody gets to hide behind the keyboard, and I'm totally over it. If it weren't for putting these parties together and drift events together and everything else, then I could totally walk away from it. But for now, it's kind of a tool.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is, a tool. And I'm the same way. Every now and then, I'll scroll through and see what people are posting. And then I end up just liking everything because I feel like I haven't liked anything that they posted in a while. I want them to know that I was there.
Right.
But 90% of the time, you know, people say, "Oh, well, you didn't see this?" No, they said it was on Facebook. I'm like, I missed it. So promote the filmmaking and the podcast, and every now and then I'll post a picture which absolutely nobody but about 5 people that ride motorcycles care about. I'll post a picture of a motorcycle, and that's between realizing that most people don't care about what you post, and I really don't care about what they post. And I don't mean that in a mean way, but I don't care what you had for dinner, and I like my cat, and I like cats, but necessarily care about people's pet photos and their kids. I'm sure for the family members that see the kids standing on the sidewalk the first day of school, there are people that enjoy those. But for me, who I don't even know these children, I'm not that interested in. But and even that, I don't even have a problem with that. I think it's the false nature of it, you know, and I'm guilty of it too. You put your best foot forward. You're going to put the absolute, you know, if you take 10 pictures, you're going to put the best one on there, and choose your words wisely if you're smart. And it's just not a real reflection of an actual person, the way that you get when you're hanging out and talking with someone. And even, you know, I this summer I haven't really been out that much. I missed the last couple dance parties, you know, the idea of like just walking into a bar and, hey, how you been? Good. Well, it's hot out there. Yeah. Well, dude. Small talk. I kind of lost my interest in that. So I like doing the podcast because it is one-on-one, and
you talk about something real.
Yeah, and you actually have a conversation. I think I say it on here all the time. I think that's why people like to listen to him too, is because it is a different level of conversation, even if it's a topic that they may not be interested in. Which reminds me, the reason why I asked you to come on was to talk about cars and your drift event, and we're half hour in and we haven't touched upon it, but that's okay because I've enjoyed the first half of the conversation. But last time I saw you, you're telling me about an event that you threw that was a lot different than a dance deep down into West Virginia, right?
Yeah, so Old Fields, West Virginia, which is basically 40 minutes roughly east of like Thomas and Davis and that whole Blackwater Falls area. Maybe not even Blackwater, I think it's Douglas Falls. I don't know my way around down there so well as like maybe Will Wallace or some of these guys. I'm sure Jesse Mestrovic has seen all of it because those are like outdoorsy man's man dudes. But yeah, that place, just as a background, I've been drifting for probably 4 or 5 years, which if you're listening and don't know what that is, I recommend YouTube to kind of to see what's going on. But it's kind of Somebody told me it's like the fastest growing motorsport in America. I don't know if that's true, but I definitely have met a lot of people through it, so that could be accurate. And basically that came from, I had done quote unquote the local events for the last few years. And when I say local, like the closest track is an hour and a half away or so. So there's 2 tracks kind of within that vicinity. And there's an organization called Club Loose that puts those together, and they do between like 8 and 12 events a year. So I was doing those, and then, I was kind of excited to try like a larger road course where, the local events were a skid pad, which is, just imagine the most massive parking lot you've ever seen, and they use the orange cones to kind of set up a track, and you stay in that kind of lane. And then the other one was, a speedway, which is your kind of NASCAR style oval with like a figure 8 in the center. So you would go into the infield and kind of do a figure 8 and come back out. So I was kind of enthusiastic about doing a road course, which is, kind of more like a racetrack.
You got turns left, right, up and
Yeah.
down. Did it have any hills up and down?
West Virginia does, definitely.
Yeah, nice.
So my first experience with a road course, I actually went to Ontario, Canada last year to a place called Shannonville, which is in the middle of nowhere. You're just driving through these like wheat fields, and then all of a sudden there's this track. And it was very much, as far as an organization, very much like the Wild West of drifting. Safety, not to, rag on their organization, but safety definitely did not seem like a primary concern.
Yeah.
But the amount of seat time you got there was great, and the opportunity to, get some experience behind the wheel on one of these larger, faster tracks. And the reason I ended up going there was because I promised a Canadian friend of mine, Guillaume, who has been to Wheeling.
I think I met him last summer, right?
Yeah. To describe him as a character would almost be doing him a disservice of under describing him. But so I agreed to go up and do that event, one of those with him, and it was a 2-day event where you could camp at the track, and we timed it correctly where one of their bigger events happened a couple weeks before that, so that when I showed up, a lot of cars would be broken or crashed or something from the last event, so it wouldn't be overly attended, and I could get a lot of seat time and not worry so much about standing in line forever to drive or having tons and tons of cars on the track at once. So that worked out pretty well, and actually the first day I probably just spent driving around terrified for my life because these guys, I've never been on a track this big. It was really weird to get used to the idea that you could comfortably to drift, the first corner, if you weren't going 80 miles an hour and then throwing the car sideways, then you weren't going fast enough. You weren't going to make it through the rest of the corner, and it was going to be stupid. So that took some warming up, and then by the second day, when I was getting used to it, I was having a blast, and really, really throwing the car hard and driving fast, and I thought, man, this is great. Like, this is the kind of drifting I want to do. And so also last year, I'm on my way to like a big kind of East Coast drift event that a larger organization put together where they brought a pretty famous driver over from Japan. They shipped his car. It was called Low Style. It was in Virginia. So I'm on the way there. I get completely lost somewhere in, eastern central West Virginia. And I'm coming down this, mountain on the highway, and I happen to look over on the side of the hill, and I see this amazing paved road course, or that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
With no signs around it, and it does not appear to be a racetrack. And I thought, oh my God, like, what is that? So I just, I memorized whatever the name of the exit was there.
Yeah.
And then I went to the drift event in Virginia. And when I came home a couple days later, I kind of Googled this exit so I could try to find the spot. And so I find it, and I click on it, and it's called Panthera Training Center, and it's actually a law enforcement military training facility. So in addition to that track, they have a skid pad, and they have this mock town where you could stage riots and teach
nice.
police to go in and I guess, handle a hostage situation or something like that. There are live fire shooting ranges there. There's a dirt course. And, then I found an old video on YouTube of the same facility where 4 or 5 guys had drifted before. And I thought, okay, maybe they'll allow drifting here.
Yeah.
So I contacted them and said, hey, could I, just come in with 10 of my friends and rent the track from you and drift for the day and then leave? And so they said, well, I don't think you understand. This is a military training facility and we don't really work with civilians at all. And I said, okay, but what if you did? So, I explained, hey, we would pay up front and, I'll do everything I can to make sure that it goes smoothly, and that all you really have to do is, open the door for us.
Yeah.
So this occurs over a series of emails and phone calls last, late summer, early fall, and they finally say, okay, you can do it, but it's $2,500.
Wow.
And I thought, man, okay, but I'm gonna need 15 drivers instead of 10, and they said, okay, fine.
Yeah.
So, if you do the math, you can still kind of reasonably make that happen, and people pay less than $200 to drive all day. And with 15 drivers, there's never going to be any line, and it's gonna, you're gonna get more seat time than you could ever imagine, and you're probably gonna run out of tires before you run out of time. So by that point, it was fall when they finally gave me the okay. So I gave them a date in May of this year, and it ended up being May 5th. And they said okay, and I started getting my drivers together. And the event in May was called Mayday Matsuri. Matsuri is like a Japanese word for carnival or festival, and they kind of use that a lot for their drift events. And that was just kind of a nod to where the sport originated.
Yeah.
And in between them giving me the okay and me going to or doing the event in May, Alec and I go to Australia, and to be totally honest, 75% of the reason I go is for drifting, because it's summer there, and I know they have this massive event of the kind of style of drifting that I like. So that event went really, really well. I think we ended up having maybe 17 drivers. It rained a little bit, and the track was really intimidating for a lot of people, including myself, because it is not like a state-of-the-art designed racetrack where if you slide off in this corner, there's a tire wall or a barrier or something like that, or even, runoff room. Just certain places, if you go off the track, you're going to go off a cliff, or you're going to fall down the hill until you hit a tree or something like that. So it was I was really, really careful about who I allowed to drive there. I wanted to make sure that basically I was the worst driver attending.
Yeah.
And then that way I knew, everybody has my skill level or better, so I shouldn't have to worry. And, that one went kind of without a hitch, but I kind of got a lot of feedback as far as people got upset that they didn't get invited.
Yeah.
A lot of people that I knew locally. And it wasn't like I didn't invite these people because I didn't like them or something like that. It was just a matter of hey, I know this person will reliably show up and I'll be comfortable with them driving. And I wanted to keep the first one very, very small and manageable, so that I could kind of build a rapport with the owners of the track and them them kind of associate with me with, oh, that guy's easy money and he makes it really smooth, so we'll work with him again. So with that in mind, I kind of kept the first event not a secret, but kind of hushed, and limited number of drivers. Well, after that happened, I got so much feedback of people that were really interested, and as soon as they saw photos or video of this track, they were like, whoa, like, this place is insane, this is awesome. After that, I said, all right, well, if they'll let me, I'll do 30 drivers next time. So they upped the price of the track, but they allowed for 30, and that was at the end of July. So I have to pay for the track 30 days ahead of time. So I set a deadline, you PayPal me, and then I write a check to the track, and then that money's gone, right? So the day of the deadline, I have 6 drivers signed up. And I was like, guys, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I'm going to have to cancel the event, and I'm not trying to give anybody a hard time. I understand everybody's got bills or other, obligations, but I really didn't want to cancel because I wanted to continue to build that confidence with the track and make this kind of not a regular thing, but something that I could reliably call them and then be willing to work with me.
Yeah.
Because it's an amazing track that's really, really fun to drive. So it's this Friday, and I have the money's due like the following Wednesday, and I have 6 drivers, and I wanted to set that deadline so I had a little bit of wiggle room, and I'm like, I need bare minimum 25 to break even and to make this happen. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And I picked one of the guys that had come to the last event. His name's Alex. He's from Penn State area. And I said, hey, you seem to be really well known because of your car. Feel free to kind of contact your buddies that are not on this list that I have and see if they'd be interested in driving, only if you feel confident in their driving abilities.
Yeah.
He said, okay. In the meantime, I'm going through Instagram and just looking up all the teams on the East Coast, basically, within like an 8 or 10 hour drive, who, based on the photos I'm seeing, I'm confident with their driving abilities.
Yeah.
And I'm just contacting these guys. Hey, here's a picture of this track. I'm trying to make something happen here. I need drivers by, the end of the week. Would you be interested? And at least 2 teams got back to me, and 1 actually showed up. And they were from, I think, the Maryland area.
Yeah.
They're called Blackhand. So all their cars are the same color, kind of the same style, and like aesthetically really looks cool when those guys are ripping through a corner side by side.
Yeah.
And everything kind of matches. So in addition to Alex, Brandon Challey was coming to the event, and he put the word out, and a couple of other people, including Jordan, who was kind of the partner of the event the first time. He's really well known in kind of the middle of Pennsylvania, so I thought it would be helpful for him to pick, of the 15 drivers, he picks half, I pick the other half. So anyway, I go to lunch that Friday and have 6 drivers, and I'm worried that I'm going to have to cancel this, and it's a bust, and I'm really bummed because I was excited for like a lot of the local guys to see this track and get to drive with me, and we would kind of have this resource of an exciting place to go a couple times a year. I get back from lunch and open my PayPal account, and like 13 people, without saying a word to me, had sent me money. And I was like, oh my God, hold up. Like, we have to, this is exciting because maybe I won't have to cancel, but I need to talk to every driver and make sure that they have like the skills and the experience to handle this track and not be complete, crazy people, that their car is safe, they have a fire extinguisher, they're willing to play by the rules, they're willing to pay this much, and they understand, like, can't do refunds because I pay for the track 30 days ahead of time, and then that's it.
Yeah.
So from the moment I got off work till 9:30 that night, all I did was talk to drivers and take entry fees.
Nice.
And I went from having 6 drivers over a period of 30 days that had, locked down a spot and were willing to drive to, in a matter of 6 hours, I had all 30.
Wow.
And I was completely, amazed and humbled that these people that have never met me from Hershey, Pennsylvania, and there's a team from Georgia that was going to try to come up. And I don't think he could get his other guys on board.
Yeah.
But Maryland, there was a guy came from New York. They came in droves, and the event went great. I had Will Wallace and Jake and Eli Humphreys and Alec Berry all kind of come on as track workers and spotters because there's so many blind corners. Miranda set up the Facebook page for me as far as like making an image, and I did like written invitations to anybody that sent me their address once they gave me the entry fee, just to kind of make it like, I guess, a little bit special.
Yeah.
So a lot of us showed up the night before and got to meet each other and crash at these townhouses that the place also owns, and then you drive 10 minutes to the track. And
Oh, nice.
It's game on from there, and the only downside to this is like when you run the event, you don't get to drive as much, but it's better than seeing that track from the highway that one day and just it being a pipe dream that you never get to drive on. But it went great. There were some media guys that came. Daxton's he was at the party last night, so it would have been cool to introduce you, but he's kind of been helpful from day one as far as doing these private events. And he was there, but he also invited some media guys that he was comfortable with. So there are drones in the sky, like taking
Nice.
videos of these cars, and lots of guys like climbing through the weeds, literally, to take photos, because all around this track you're just in the middle of the mountains, and the grass isn't even cut.
Yeah.
So the photos are amazing because it just looks like this road in the middle of nowhere, and there's mountains and fog behind you and stuff like that. So that was really exciting. That had a good turnout, and since then I have one more this year in October, so I'll organize that and get to drive there again, and so we'll see what happens for next year. The goal, I guess, would be to try to talk them into doing 2-day events where I could do a Saturday and Sunday, and you drive both days, and only do it maybe twice a year, kind of the beginning and ending of the season, because I don't really want to step on the toes of the local guys as far as like them trying to get attendance at their events, and I've found that the amount of planning required for this is insane, and I will never be nervous before a later Gator party again, or stressed out in terms of like what I have to accomplish prior, because these drift events are like, they're mountains to move.
Yeah.
But so far they have ended up being worth it, because so many of those guys were easy to work with. They were really enthusiastic. They drove really hard, which I like to see. I was excited that people weren't really standing around so much. They were like, this is a special opportunity to drive this track, and I'm going to go hard.
Yeah.
And by the end of the day, people were really getting the track figured out and putting down some fast laps, and that was exciting to see. Will Wallace had the best time of anyone there.
I saw from his post on Facebook, oddly enough, that you could just tell he was just over the moon, hooked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just from what I saw, it looked like a ton of fun. The reason why I kind of wanted you to come on and talk about this is because I'm really impressed with the fact that I didn't know the story about how you just kind of drove by the track and everything, but the idea that you took the time to actually put on this event so that your friends and other people could really enjoy it. And like you said, oftentimes you probably get to drive less than everybody else, and
It's very much like the later gator parties. It's just something born out of necessity where I see this thing from the road and I figure, if I want to drive there, I'm going to have to make it happen because, most people don't even know it exists. So I just started making phone calls and going from there. But it definitely would not have been possible without the people that showed up. So,
sure.
And, it's impressive, like, how willing people are to trust this person that they never met and send them, send me $140 and, show up that day.
And hope that it's not bullshit.
Yeah, totally.
Well, just from the standpoint of, you drove by the track and the incredible, I can only imagine how much time and effort and stress it takes to put on one of those events, and the fact that you did it and then you did it again and you're still wanting to do it again. People don't take that time anymore, and I hope that people listening to this, whatever it is that they're into, that they realize that someone's got to be the guy. Like you said, it is born out of necessity, but I think there's the attitude that someone else will do it. Sometimes you have to be the guy that does it, or the girl, and at the end of the day, you're a guy like the rest of us. You're an ordinary guy. You have a job and everything. There's, you weren't born into the...
and I really don't have any interest in being this, regular drift event promoter or organizer. I'm not necessarily trying to make a side career out of that, but it's kind of, Will is kind of famous for saying, "Oh, you just fake something until you figure it out."
Yeah.
And between that and like, my dad has always been of the mindset like, "Oh, if you figure out something cool or see it or get this idea, like, no better time than the present. Why mess around?" So, I don't think a lot of people, even the people that came to the event, realized like how much I was just like flying by the seat of my pants and trying to figure it out as I went. But like the first event, we didn't even have spotters. It was very much, because there were 15 drivers, it was not as dangerous, but it was very much like, hey, you're going to go and do a lap, and if the guy in front of you spun out like around a blind corner, you're going to have to kind of just be responsible for yourself as far as keeping your head up and really pay attention, because we're the only ones here.
Yeah.
So, and the next town over is 10 minutes away, but other than that, like, we're kind of responsible for our own safety. And I think even now people will realize that after the second event, even with the spotters and everything, that this is very, very, very much a DIY thing. It's about it's not like going to a sanctioned racetrack. It's a lot more like if you found a road that you really liked and you blocked it off from normal traffic,
right,
and just went ham with your friends, basically. And in that aspect, it's really exciting and it's really fun, but you also cannot like downplay the level of danger there.
Right.
So it's impressive the amount of people that were willing to accept that and give me a shot and do this, and that 2 events have gone well. And since then, one of the guys that came to my event the last time, he's got it sounds like he's got deeper pockets to make these things happen, but he has reserved that track 3 more times this year.
Oh, wow.
And I think he's got the idea to do 1 a month, next season. So that place went in the matter of 6 months, went from, not even on our radar to, okay, this has a future.
Yeah, this is
so,
the new spot.
Yeah, so that's exciting, especially because of the level that track is, and it's definitely, it's not a place for beginners at all. And with that said, I'm probably the worst driver from wheeling, and that might come from the chassis that I've chosen to drive. Like an 84 RX-7 is not the optimal drift car, but I still do have 4 years of experience.
Yeah.
and so there's just certain spots or things that I don't try because I know it's not worth the risk. So if you can come in with that mentality to that track instead of an egotistical like, oh, I'm just gonna kill it the first lap, that's really helpful, and that'll keep you safe longer.
You do have to have a certain amount of humility. So you were saying that about the amount of skill that it takes to be competent. How do you even get experience drifting? It's got to be really hard. If you do you have to wait till you find a track, or do you find a little back alley parking lot or something where you can practice? How do you it seems like a difficult sport to get into.
Well, I came from a background of like I grew up on a farm where when I was a little kid I had a go-kart and then I had a dirt bike. So the idea of like the back of the car sliding and counter steering, that was kind of intuitive by then. By the time I had a license, I kind of knew what that felt like. It was just when you brought it to a car, it was a lot larger, heavier scale. So the first time the RX-7 got sideways, like I caught the slide, but then it slid the other way, and I caught that again, and then it slid the other way, and so I'm going down a straightaway, just back and forth, like basically wagging the tail before it finally calmed down, and you kind of realize like what about your technique is wrong as far as keeping that from happening. But to be totally honest, I've definitely done it on the street before. Less and less the older I get and the more points I racked on my license over the years. But I think most of us have at least messed around in a large parking lot in the rain. Because then it makes less noise and it's easier to get the car to slide. But it's I can't in good conscience say that that's worth the trouble that you can get into. Not to mention, if you bash into a pole or something like that. And it's really, compared to getting real track time, doing something on the street, you might get one or two shots at this one corner before you have to get the hell out of there before you get caught. Whereas if you go to the track, even though you might have to wait in line 15 minutes at a time, you're going to again and again get to
hit that same corner.
Right, and get a really good notion for like how your car feels and how it reacts and what you need to do, and do a trial and error until you figure it out. And that's one thing that the Club Loose events have been really, really great for since day one, as far as if you bought a car tomorrow, a rear-wheel drive car, and you put coilovers on it and you welded the differential and put a seat in it. For the record, that's all you need to drift. And if you think that you need 500 horsepower, you're sadly mistaken, which is great because it's a lot cheaper that way. But once you have that car and it's day one, I'm assuming you can drive a stick, that's where you would go. You would go to pit race, up in Beaver, Pennsylvania, and do that cone course and just start getting used to driving the car. And getting it sideways and allowing it to slide and not getting freaked out and counter steering too early or something like that. And if you're listening to this and you have no idea what anybody's talking about or the event specifically, if you get on Facebook and look up Drift Pizza Media, that's Daxton, and he's got a lot of photos from the last event. The event was called Heat Wave, so it'll kind of give you an idea of like visually what this looks like and what we're trying to do. And basically all you're doing is like purposely sliding the car through a series of corners with that while trying not to spin out completely. And the only reason to do this is basically that it looks really cool and it's a lot of fun.
And it's basically a controlled loss of control of the car. The back end breaks free, and at which point most drivers would spin out or lose control of the car, and through practice you learn how to control that to your benefit.
It's definitely a sort of controlled chaos, and the best drifting runs basically look like he's going to crash the entire time, and he doesn't crash.
Now, I don't know much about the events, so it's not a race, right?
Correct.
Is it style points? Is it I know that there is competitive drift.
There is
events.
competitive drifting, and I'm not really the person to talk to about it because I don't even really fully understand the rules, but kind of, what people consider to be a good run in drifting is a really high speed where the angle of your car is extreme as far as you're really, really sideways instead of just barely getting the rear end to step out. Like, you're looking through your side windows at where you're going, basically. Right. And really pushing the car towards the very edges of the track where it looks like you're going to rub against the wall or slide off the track
I've seen people
whatever
hit
it
like
might be.
tennis balls off of a cone before.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's really how well you can control the vehicle and make it do what you want under the most extreme.
It's definitely more of drifting is more akin to skateboarding or BMX or something like that than it is to like a racing type motorsport.
Freestyle kind of.
Exactly. So you're trying to do something because that looks a certain way, and is the most exciting that it could possibly be on kind of a subjective scale. But with that said, it was definitely born out of like a racing maneuver, I think, where either these rally guys or guys on a road course would kind of pitch the car sideways to get the nose pointed to the exit of the corner faster so they can get back on the throttle. And so with that said, speed always makes drifting better, in my opinion. It's always going to look better. It's going to feel better. Like, it takes a little while to train your brain to say, okay, now I'm going to throw the car sideways at 70 miles an hour. And I've done that with my car, and I'm not a phenomenal driver, and it's not a phenomenal car, but, once you get used to these things, it becomes kind of, you become comfortable with this idea. And once you do that and you're going sideways at those sorts of speeds, like, it's very addictive.
So for anybody listening that imagine you're driving on a really snowy day. Most people don't have rear-wheel drive cars anymore, but you're going down a hill and you hit the brakes and the back end starts to slide out on you. That's the point where most people panic. Is when the back of the car breaks loose and technically you start to lose control of the car. And for you guys at 70 miles an hour, that's where you start having fun. Yeah,
that's what you're looking for is the car to get kind of sideways like that. And there's plenty of videos if you get on YouTube and just look up drifting or what it is. And it's just I've gotten a lot of people in my car at like the skid pad events who had not experienced it at all before, including like Jake and Sam or Miranda's roommate Paige, and Paige especially, so she was very apprehensive about it ahead of time, like, and I think people that have experienced a car crash before or something like that, that's what this looks like, the first part of a car crash. So they're apprehensive about getting in the car, and then halfway through the first lap they're like, oh yeah, I'm about this is great, this is super fun. And it has like a certain similarity or feeling to like sled riding almost. Yeah. And it's totally childish, but it's a blast.
Yeah. So is riding a motorcycle.
Right.
It's leading a turn and just seeing how fast you can take a corner and how low you can go. For me, that's the thrill of it. Mm-hmm. And there's.
Speaking of, AJ and his roommate recently bought old two-stroke dirt bikes, and which I kind of grew up on, and we've gone out a couple times, and I've realized I am no longer 15.
Two-stroke dirt bikes, they sound great. They have so much power, and
they are. If you're not familiar with them at all, they almost seem like they have a mind of their own. Yeah. And they're just animals, but totally had a blast and was like, man, I want to get back into this. And then, the next day you can barely walk. And you're like, So it's definitely a trade-off, but
Yeah, people don't realize riding a dirt bike and when they say that these things are sports, they're not kidding. Even I'm sure driving a drift car requires you to have a certain amount of physicality to keep up with the car and I mean it's not a Sunday drive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's for people that don't know, it's rear wheel drive cars.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them they have a modified handbrake.
Yeah, some of them use your emergency brake that's normally to the right of your seat. A lot of guys are still using just that brake normally, and what you're doing with that is kind of adjusting your line once you're sideways. You can kind of slow the car down without stopping it from sliding, and you can kind of adjust your angle a little bit with the e-brake. Full disclaimer, I don't have a lot of experience with it because mine doesn't work.
Mine doesn't either.
But a lot of guys also will install kind of a hydraulic handbrake, which works the same as, you pushing the pedal, but it only actuates the rear tires.
Oh, okay.
So, and they just have a lot more power and are able to lock up the tires kind of consistently. The only reason I don't have one is because I think the cable is stretched on the car, and I've messed with it a few times, but I think it just needs to be replaced. I would like to have it because it would just give me more control once I am sideways.
Yeah.
So that's part of the technique, I guess, and then other than that, you're just kind of like purposely upsetting the balance of the car so that it will slide into the corner, and then you use the throttle to continue the slide. And then, steering obviously to control how much angle you're giving it.
So I know I asked you about the tires that you had on your porch. How much life do you get out of a set of tires?
So because my car is really, really light and not terribly powerful, I could get an entire day or maybe 2 events out of a set of tires, drifting for 6 or 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
Guys with 400 horsepower and 3,000 pound cars, it's going to be 5 to 10 laps for them, depending on the size of the track. So that's where the sport gets expensive, and a lot of these guys run a really common tire size just so that they can go to dealerships and get the old tires for basically free or whatever. But once you hit a certain skill level, you want the grip in the rear of a brand new tire.
Yeah.
And especially when the cars are that powerful. So if you want to really go fast sideways, you kind of want a new tire. So that's where it gets expensive, because those guys could use 4 pairs of tires in a day or something like that. But it's still, I would argue, probably one of the cheapest motorsports in comparison to if you want to go road racing or something like that.
Yeah. I know I had my Celica for a while, and I thought about getting it ready for the track. And when I just started calculating the cost of what it would cost to race that car one weekend.
Oh, it's daunting.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of, I have a friend who races consistently in Columbus, and the car that he has built is insane, and there's over $100,000 into it, maybe 200. And it has a prototype engine that he built himself. That's his business.
Yeah.
But any of those guys on a weekend-to-weekend basis, that could be $1,500 every time they want to spend a weekend doing that. So racing is definitely, it's an expensive sport, and it requires you to be selfish. Yeah. So if you had a wife and kids, or in my case, with drifting and just wanting to modify cars, I've had a bathroom renovation project for over a year now. Yeah. It's not really far along, because I don't care, because it doesn't, I can't drift my bathtub, and I have a shower downstairs that works, so I don't really care. Those things kind of fall by the wayside, and I think if you had a child or something like that, it would be very difficult to be a good dad and go racing every weekend.
Yeah. When people ask me they say, I'm thinking about getting a motorcycle, I usually say, don't.
Mm-hmm.
I love it, but A, it's addictive. B, it's kind of a dangerous thing to be addicted to. It's not maybe as bad as heroin, but if you're one of the people that catch the bug, you want to do it all the time, and you do neglect other things. This is the first podcast I've probably done in a month, just because when we finally get some
nice
good weather
out, yeah.
and I want to ride. I got a new bike, so I want to ride even more, and I'm sure when you have that track day, you get up in the morning, you're ready to go. Hit the
Yeah, and part of it's nerves, I think, but I'm up at 6 a.m. and like, it's kind of I'm kind of annoyed that it doesn't start till 10 or 9. My short experience with like street motorcycles, I thought I would get more into it, but I became jaded by how often the cars did not see me and how small and dangerous I felt. Because people multiple times just on National Road would pull out right in front of me, and I had this like 72 Honda that didn't have great brakes and stuff like that.
Which
and just
is that
riding
the one
next
that I
to
have now?
Yes. So riding next to a semi truck on the highway feels really weird.
Yeah.
In my experience, what I would do is just hurry up and pass them because I didn't like that wind buffeting feeling. I don't really.
Me neither.
But that said, AJ got those dirt bikes, and it like that whole kind of spark inside me that was always excited about that as a kid, that came back hard to the point like I'm on Craigslist. So those are a really good time with a different set of dangers, but you don't have to worry about 2-ton vehicles hitting you so much because you're either on a track or in a field or something like that. With that said, if you saw my thighs the other day, you'd be like, "Oh, this is absolutely dangerous," because I went over the handlebars, but and I caught the handlebars with my thighs, so they looked pretty gross. But it just comes with the territory.
At least you're not sliding across hard pavement, rips your skin open. And
I've gotten like pretty bad road rash just coming off a skateboard at high speed, so I don't understand these guys coming off a motorcycle at 80 miles an hour, and like I would imagine it just goes straight to bone immediately if you don't have all the gear on.
Yeah.
And if you're that guy that's riding around on your CBR 600 with like flip-flops and a t-shirt and a tank top, like you don't look cool, man. Like you just, to me, you look like the calm before the storm, basically. Like if you go down, everything is gonna hurt for a long time.
If you make it, in Ohio there's no helmet laws, and
I don't understand that.
I've wore a full face helmet ever since I started, and I could care less what it looks like because just from the simple fact that I don't want things hitting me in the face, let alone you don't plan on wrecking, but you're always going to have rocks and bugs and the amount of things I clean off my helmet every time I ride. I couldn't imagine if I didn't have that on. All that stuff would just be hitting me in the face. But you probably so. At what age did you really get into cars and motorcycles and? Do you remember when you?
Like when I was a kid, I was maybe kind of peripherally interested in the way cars looked or something like that, or might have had a favorite, but wasn't even really conscious of them so much. When I was like 10 years old, I was going to be a marine biologist. Like I was really into reading about animals and stuff like that.
Right.
And, wanted to learn to scuba dive and that whole scene. And then I think I was 10, and my dad's friend came over to the farm with his son, and he brought a Honda Z50, which is like the tiniest little dirt bike you could ever imagine. It has like, it's a 3-speed, but there's no clutch, so it's relatively easy for a kid to learn. And I was like intimidated by it, and they didn't tell me they were bringing this thing, and it seemed like his son had no interest in riding it that day, but so basically they got it out of the truck, and like the sentiment was like, all right, Danny, you're gonna get on this thing. And I didn't know how I felt about it, and within like 2 laps around the barnyards or whatever, like my whole life was changed. Like that sounds kind of corny, but like a Honda 50 kind of just
when you're 10
struck a nerve. And from there on, like I remember we boarded horses then, and I was kind of doing like horseback riding lessons and stuff like that, kind of informally.
Yeah.
Like that was out the window. Forget horses. Like
You're done.
It's motorcycles now, and it took probably, I think it took 2 years after that to like talk my parents into letting me get a dirt bike. And then there were all these negotiations. Like the stipulation was that I had to get the honor roll.
That was mine.
In 7th grade.
Yeah.
And then, so I got that, and I was like, all right, well, let's get this bike. And then we're like, all right, well, you have to pay for it. And I was like, what? Like, I'm 12. It's $2,000. I don't even know what $2,000 looks like.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my dad bought it, but then I had to keep, like, a log of all the farm work that I did for $5 an hour.
To pay it off.
Yeah, and it took a year and a half, but I actually did it. And then I think I did it to the extent that when I added it all up, he owed me like $200.
Nice.
Which I was pretty excited about. He was not, but yeah, I rode that bike for a couple of years, and then kind of graduated to like a 2-stroke race bike, because that original bike was like a trail play bike. It was brand new, but it was not. It was very, very user friendly. It had a clutch, but it was maybe 10 horsepower.
Yeah.
And then I got a YZ85, which is just weapons grade ammunition for a small child.
Oh, that's a great bike.
And to this day, like, even though I've ridden like the big 2-stroke bikes, they're not as scary as that little one, because it was a shorter wheelbase and it was like harder to control.
Yeah.
But it was totally eye-opening and amazing, and I had a blast on that and broke my elbow at the track the first time I went to a motocross track and stuff like that. But then I think I turned 15, and kind of the people were falling off as far as like people that you could ride dirt bikes with.
Yeah.
My good friend who lived down the road, didn't really continue the dirt bike thing with me, because he was kind of who I rode with exclusively all the time. And even something as fun as motorcycles is kind of lame by yourself.
Yeah.
So with that writing on the wall, I sold that bike and started looking for a car. And, at 17, I bought the RX-7.
You've had that car since you were 17?
Yeah,
That's
which
cool.
is the car I drift now. And that car's been through several iterations of different, modification setups, but things have kind of gone full circle now, where it's like, man, I kind of miss dirt bikes.
Yeah.
And, I've ridden them here and there and kind of got the bug out of my system occasionally over the years, but this is the first time where I felt like I might be able to like make time and effort for this if I can find a good deal on one or something like that. But it's definitely, I have a friend who he rode like at least one day a week, sometimes twice a week, over the course of 3 or 4 years or more, out of high school. And he said, it's a great time, but it will make you an old man fast.
Yeah.
He has a knee problem that's, directly related to dirt bikes. And, I've also skateboarded, for something like 10 years off and on now. Never put a lot of time into it, but I know that my left knee will have issues when I'm older, because it's taken like direct hits to cement over and over again. So that's kind of the trade-off, and you like realize that you're not 13, but at the same time, like, I feel like if you're 80 years old and your body's just not like used up and just garbage by then, like, you left some on the table, and you're gonna like, I personally am gonna be like, man, I should have gone harder when I was like 35. I should have kept doing it. And one of the guys, the first time I went to a motocross track, a guy kind of let me follow him for a lap so I could see how the track was laid out. And I remember he was married and he was like 33 or something.
Yeah.
And that like struck with me even back then. I was like, oh, I can keep doing this.
Yeah.
But it's definitely helpful to, it's just totally dangerous to ride by yourself. and it's good as far as pushing each other to have somebody there and to have somebody to have fun with. So it's kind of exciting that, you know, a couple of my friends have gotten back into them. Although a lot of old guys are like, "Oh, you're in trouble." Like,
in limited quantities, you know.
yeah.
I loved same thing. I always was probably C or D student. My dad never thought I'd make it on the honor roll 3 times in a row, and I did. And so he had to get me a bike, and he got me the cheapest Hadaka dual sport 125, and I love that bike. But you know, the bad thing about dirt bikes is after a while you kind of run out of the same places to ride. You know, you can only go the same places so many times. We had a good bit of area to ride, and so
yeah, these big 2-stroke bikes have made. My parents live on 96 acres. Those bikes will make it feel like a sandbox.
Yeah.
Like you're just instantly from one end of the farm to the other, and you didn't get out of third gear. And
Yeah.
you're like, man, like this just, it seemed so big when I was a kid, and now like I'm running out of room. So, yeah, that was kind of the downside of dirt bikes always was you could kind of grow out of or get bored with wherever you were riding.
Yeah.
In addition to, if you got them at a younger age, then even though the bike is in good shape and it still runs well and everything, your body's going to get too big for it.
yeah.
And that's kind of a bummer because, you know, especially if you started as a kid, you're going to get maybe 2 or 3 years out of each bike, and then you need to keep like graduating up.
Yeah. And then and for me, I think for dirt bikes, if you get beyond a 250, then it starts to get kind of scary.
Sure.
Yeah. And same with sport bikes. You know, I had my fun with the R6 last summer, and now I think back, it was a little crazy that I owned that bike because I was 50 when I bought it, and usually most people sell their sport bike before they get to 40, and that's when they graduate to the big cruiser bike and they put it away. And that was really rough on just the hips. You know, a couple hours on that bike, and your hips and your shoulders and your neck and your back.
Yeah, there's sort of a tough kind of inversion to like the really fast sport bikes, where when you have the means to buy one, and you can afford the insurance, which is always insane.
Yeah.
A lot of these bikes are on like a blacklist for the insurance companies, but by the time that you're old and like wealthy, I guess, enough to put one of these in your garage, and you have the wisdom to not be a complete idiot on that bike, your body is also to a point where you're not as agile, you're not as alert, you don't like to be in that position for an extended period of time. I mean, even a 22-year-old kid on a sport bike, it's going to hurt your back within an hour because you're just crouched over. But, you know, when you're young, all you can afford is like the lame, slow bikes.
Right.
And I always thought I wanted a sport bike, and when I was younger, I was like, I'm gonna wait a year because then I'll calm down and like I won't drive it like a madman.
Yeah.
But you know, I borrowed AJ's bike. I think it was last summer. I was on the bike 5 minutes. I got a reckless.
Yeah.
Like, I just can't help myself.
Well,
if you actually give me something fast, I'm going to go fast.
And they're not. You know, I see every now and then you'll see somebody with a backpack commuting to school on one of those bikes, and it's really a track bike with turn signals.
Yeah.
And sound of the police. And I'm kind of glad that I got rid of it, because if you're going down the highway doing 80 miles an hour on one of those bikes, you really don't have it nearly. You're maybe hitting 1/3, depending on what gear you're in, maybe 1/3 of the power. And I had mine for a year, and it would redline at 12,500 RPMs. I don't think I ever had it above 8. And I definitely had it up to speeds that were scary. But more than that, just you really weren't even trying to see how fast you go. You just were going very fast. And the fact that I like the back roads, the fact that you could pass just about anybody meant that, you know, there's a couple times I definitely did some questionable.
Yeah.
coming up on the hill, and there's 3 cars in front of me, and I know I can make it. And it was just, you're just hoping that you have the good fortune that nobody's coming the other way, because you're not going to be able to see that far ahead. And but it's no fun to just follow somebody at 40 miles an hour on one of those bikes. So I found a good middle ground. I have an Octane now, and it's plenty quick enough. And
and I guess if you're listening, you don't really have a lot of experience with like high performance motorcycles, I guess. What a lot of people don't understand is like the cars that they drive on a day-to-day basis are very much like the product of a cost-conscious corporation.
Yeah.
Where, they get heavier every year, they get safer every year, and kind of driver involvement is in performance as far as how well it accelerates or how well it brakes and stuff like that is not so much a priority as, making it very easy to live with and drivable. And things like that, and good fuel economy. Whereas motorcycles, especially the high performance ones, every year they get lighter, every year they get more powerful, and it seems like over the course of 4 to 5 years, like if you have a 2012 bike and then race it against the 2016, the 16, even though it's the same engine size and everything, is just going to absolutely walk away from the 2012. And down to just like the bolts that they use to put the fender on the forks and stuff like that, everything is a really, really, really high quality. You don't so much see like the cost cutting kind of idea there, because the competition's so high. So you can go to this dealership and spend maybe now $12,000 or $13,000, and you have this vehicle that will out accelerate and out brake a $200,000 Lamborghini.
Yeah.
So these vehicles are in the hands, and oftentimes of young people with no credit and no experience, and they'll just cut you loose.
Yeah.
So in that aspect, they're really dangerous, but they're also just really, really incredible in terms of like the level of performance you can get out of a motorcycle for a relatively low cost.
That's the thing that I was most impressed about the R6, even though it was an older one, was just how well it was engineered. Everything about it was made to go fast and stop quickly, and man, that talk about a bike that could really just stop. And once you got used to that riding position, the way you could throw it around turns, and it was all about just being able to go. And but now that it's gone and I sold it, I realized like I probably didn't need to go that hard anyhow.
No, and it's not there. I mean, first of all, you're on a motorcycle, so you're not protected around you. But a lot of these bikes will not suffer fools. If you crack the throttle really hard, then it's going to stand on its rear wheel, and you're going to be looking at the sky. And if you don't know what to do, then you're going to get hurt.
And even a lot of the cars nowadays, what's the new Chrysler motor that they have, the Hellcat?
Yeah.
And any of the newer cars, they have so much power. There's all kinds of videos online, especially the supercars, but even Camaros and Mustangs.
Sure.
People have way too much power. They stomp it at a red light and it just goes sideways. And
the fact that you had the money to buy the fast car does not automatically mean that you know how to drive the thing. Especially if you grew up, driving front-wheel drive Camrys or something like that, and then all of a sudden you have something that has these capabilities and isn't, especially if the traction control and the stability stuff is turned off, then, I guess if you don't kind of tiptoe into these things, you can find yourself in trouble.
And I think it's cool that they build these really powerful, super fast cars, but when it comes down to it, I have my little Eclipse, and it's got a 6-cylinder engine. It's super light. When I need to move it around the garage, I just push it out to the driveway, and that's more than enough car for you don't. how fast do you really want to go when you're commuting to work?
Sure.
And to be safe for other people and to not get tickets. And I'm not taking it out on a track. I was thinking about the other day when I was riding to work or driving to work. I really wasn't even thinking about it. I looked down and I went, oh my God, I'm doing 100.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just, it felt pretty natural in that. But thank God I don't have a car that would do a lot more than that, a lot easier. Every now and then I'll see a Ferrari guy has in St. Clair, so I think that thing has about 3 inches of ground clearance. There's most roads I wouldn't even want to take it on, but where could you even open up a car where you could even get near the potential of what that thing has? And so as I get older, I get more into when it comes to cars, and that to the extent that I'm into them is customized aesthetics. I got a truck again, so I've been playing around with that. And I know you got the Lexus, which it's station wagon, right?
Yeah, and so basically, the whole reason I bought that car was I just really liked the way it looked.
Yeah.
And I had a little pickup truck before that, wasn't really for sale. My friend needed a truck. He was kind of, asked me a few times to sell it to him, so I finally did, and I was picky about the next vehicle I was going to get, and I had it narrowed down to either the Lexus that I have or like a 90s M3. Very specifically, I wanted this color called Techno Violet, which is like this grayish purple. I like the way those cars look. They would be really fun to drive, but I didn't like what M3s cost for the condition that they're in.
Yeah.
They always have 170,000 miles, and they still want $7,000 for them. And if you're listening, you don't know this. BMWs and German cars in general have they're kind of more maintenance intensive, more often than anything from Japan or even America. So the Lexus, that's a non-turbo 2JZ is what the motor's called. It's an inline 6. You cannot kill them. As long as you put oil in it, it's going to just keep driving and driving until...
Basically, it's made by the Toyota company, so it's got all that quality and reliability of a Toyota.
It's like a post-apocalypse car as far as, like, it will start no matter what. But mostly what I liked about it is it was this rare, like, wagon hatchback version, and they only made 3,000 of them, and it just has really cool lines. Like, it looks a certain way, and even for me, it's very, very practical because you can put 4 people in it, or you can fold the seats flat in the back, and you can put, whatever back there. Everybody always says, like, oh, you can fold, and then you can do, like, a sheet of drywall. I don't fuck with drywall, so
right.
I wouldn't use that as
That's
a example, but naturally in my fashion, like, I've started to make it totally impractical because now it's on coilovers, and I've built a set of wheels for it that they look amazing, but they don't really fit right underneath the car. So I've already got a friend to extend the control arm so I can get more camber and get the tire underneath it, and I will still have to kind of modify the fenders and pull them out a little bit so that they fit over the tire, and the tire doesn't rub into the fender, and it's all totally an aesthetic thing, but I've kind of seen the vision in my head of as far as what I want it to look, and it's really close to that now, and that's exciting. So and it's still a car that you can, like, go to work and turn the air conditioning on and or show up to a meeting and not look like a complete madman, whereas the RX-7 looks kind of normal from the outside, I guess, other than being, like, a little bit low. But as soon as it fires up, or if you sat in it, you'd be like, what the hell is this thing? Especially if you didn't come from, like, a car background. So it's kind of, it wears its heart on its sleeve, I guess. And that's, I mean, the whole customization side of cars, like, I really like the idea of a car as, like, a canvas.
Me too.
This is my, I don't really write music, and I don't paint pictures and stuff, but this is kind of my expression. This, this thing that, it's a little bit form over function, but it's this thing that I can also drive around, but also kind of says something about me, I guess, or what I'm interested in.
I like the transformation process. I got basically an old grandpa pickup truck.
Old trucks are a blast. Like,
Yeah.
there's just something about them.
I got it in May, and I mean, it looked like it was an old farmer's truck. And this kid had it long enough to put a stereo in it. I think he had it for about 4 months, which is great. And gradually, I've just been working on making it look less like an old man truck. White letter tires, redid the wheels, tinted the windows, just trying to keep from not going overboard. I always, growing up in the country, I always liked the wooden racks. So a couple weekends ago, I put wooden racks on the back, and I'm really the kind of person that I like to, when I walk out in the morning and the door goes up in the garage, I like to see what I'm what I'm driving, and to the extent that I think I mentioned before the podcast, I bought a compressor and a spray gun. I really I like the old school paint. I like metal flake and gold leaf and not necessarily for cars, but I have an eye on this old Chevy van.
Sure.
It's in my neighborhood for sale, and I really just want to buy it just to paint it. I had a lot of fun transforming the look of that old Dodge pickup truck I had. The thing had a red bed and a blue cab, and I had this idea of what I thought it would look like, and until I finished it, it looked like crap, and it all had, until everything was painted that needed to be painted, and up close it still looked like crap because I didn't really do any body work. I just rattle canned over everything. So I look forward to being able to up my skill level, and you're right, that thing would have looked good if I would have lowered it.
Yeah, I think one of the things I like about cars is this idea that, and I mean, this applies to other aspects of life too, like, you don't have to do things a certain way, or as people expect it, and those old guys that are like really interested in like, oh, is this the original engine and paint color and stuff like that, I totally avoid having conversations with those guys at gas stations and stuff. But like, occasionally I've driven the RX-7 home, and like the kids are getting out of school at Steenrod or whatever, or it happened one time I met somebody for lunch at White Palace, and like the summer camp kids were like walking, and 4 or 5 of them just like stop in their tracks, and it just like blows them away. Like, this thing is so, like, I know that they don't know what they're looking at, but it like strikes a nerve with them. And I remember even before I was like consciously into cars, what that felt like when I was a kid, and just being like, oh man, like, and wanting to know everything about it. And just like that initial feeling of like, I don't understand this thing, but it's cool. It's just, I just know what cool looks like.
And the RX-7 is very cool because we live in an age now where cars look so much alike.
Sure.
And the RX-7, even in its day, it had a unique profile. And
I've heard criticism as far as people saying it looks like a doorstop because it's kind of a wedge shape.
It's a hot-looking doorstop.
But I've kind of always stuck with it because I kind of saw where that's a car, when it looks totally factory and original, I don't get that excited about. But I can see where it has potential to kind of reflect my style, and I can make it cool.
That's what excites me about vehicles, is the potential in them.
If it's already really, really, really cool, what am I going to do with it?
Yeah.
Like, I can't.
I gave my nephew my old Dodge Neon, and he and his buddies, I gave them an old Ford Escort, and they chased each other around the field. They were even laughing. I rattle canned one red and one blue, so it's red versus blue. And we were doing some work the other day, and we started talking about the cars, and I said, I got some KC highlights that we can put on the roof of the Neon, and fashion a brush guard, and maybe get some really huge tires and cut out the fender wells and make it look like some post-apocalyptic thing. And he got excited about it, and so that's the kind of stuff that I like. It doesn't necessarily even have to be a super nice car, just the fact that you can do stuff with it. I have a Suzuki Intruder in the back of my garage that at some point it'll be a bobber. I saw one in Ireland when I was there in Dublin, sitting on the sidewalk, and I remember thinking, oh yeah, there's a lot of potential for one. So when my neighbor said that he was selling his, I pushed it home in January, and every now and then I kind of look at it, but I know what I want to do with it, and it'll look nothing like the bike that it originally was, and I like that to be able to kind of see the hidden potential in things that maybe other people will pass by. And I like the RX-7 because it is so much different. We're at a concert and we're sitting in a parking garage waiting for the line of traffic to go, and there's 4 cars and they all looked identical, and just because I was sitting there so long staring at them, I realized one was a Kia, one was a Ford, one was a Toyota, I forget what the other was, a Nissan or something. They looked almost exactly the same from the front, from the side, from the rear. We were up at the Golden Palace, and I almost got into a Honda. I thought it was my friend's Hyundai SUV. They looked exactly the same. I'm like, oh, this isn't even the same make of car. But you see a lot of, when I look out the window from the 6th floor at the hospital, see a lot of gray cars, a lot of silver cars, a lot of white cars, a lot of black cars, a lot of red Jeeps, a lot of red pickup trucks, and that's it. You might see 1 or 2 weird looking tiny little cars that's like chartreuse or something like that, but it's almost a novelty color.
Yeah, that's kind of been a trend, where in the 90s it seemed like there were all these wild, and not that I miss teal or anything like that, but you could get a lot of options color-wise, and now it seems like any brand new car, you have 4 or 5 color options, and 2 of them are 2 different shades of gray.
Yeah.
So...
and if you want to resell it, you don't get blue.
Really?
Or anything besides white, black, and gray.
Yeah. But I saw where Volkswagen, their like highest level Golf, they're offering 40 colors now, like starting next year, and there's some really wild stuff like mauve and things like that. But yeah, that's one thing I thought about, where like the El Camino is this kind of project that fell in my lap. Everybody likes kind of the patina of it, the fact that it looks rough. But just in terms of like me developing my experiences and stuff, and trying to do something, I've really considered painting it myself, like outside at my dad's farm, and just doing the best job I can on the bodywork, and deciding I'm only gonna spend $1,000 or so on making this happen, but I definitely would pick like a unique color, because if you're gonna make the effort, I don't want it to look like the car next to it.
Yeah. And probably when I'm going to practice my paint skills on my own car, so the Eclipse is probably going to be some nice bright shade of pearl orange. I've seen them in that color before. My Honda Accord will probably be a satin olive is what I'm thinking. And if I redo my truck, I haven't totally dialed in the color for that, but it'll be something unique, because if you're going to spend the time, why not do something different? For the El Camino, I'd say just go full on lowrider. And
there's a certain part of me that totally wants to put it on 13-inch Dayton wires, but the thing is, if you go lowrider style with the paint and wheels, then you definitely got to buy the hydros. Yeah. So that's I think that you can spend something like $4,000 and $8,000 just on doing the hydraulic setup, and then you have lowriders are like I guess a genre of car culture that I think might be the only thing cooler than drift cars. And I don't have tons of experience with lowriders, but I do love the fact that traditionally, these clubs, there seems to be like a big trend in contemporary times with guys building newer cars or whatever, or doing project cars or doing show cars, where They build the car to the best of their abilities. They get it posted up all over the internet, and then they sell the car almost immediately. Like, by the time it's done, it's in their hands maybe 3 months. Whereas lowriders, guys spend years upon years putting these cars together with their sons or daughters or whatever, and then the car stays in the family for more than one generation.
Yeah.
And I think that alone is like pretty amazing. I also like the idea that they're born out of a sort of a counterculture thumb towards authorities, because the whole reason they had hydraulics in the first place was they said, they were just lowering the cars. And then the police said, okay, like the bottom of your car can't be lower than like the bottom of your wheel rim, the edge of the wheel, or some rule like that. So some guy decided, I'm going to put these aircraft hydraulic things on the suspension, and he would ride low, and then when he saw the cops, he would hit a switch and the car would go up. So it's legal as it drives by the cops, and as soon as they get away from the cops, they're back down on the ground. And I just like the whole idea of that, like, counterculture. And that's what it's born from, and it's definitely kind of a symbol of, like, Mexican-American progress and being able to, like, thrive in a city or a country that kind of historically has worked against you. So, like, having this amazing lowrider is not only a testament to your skills and abilities, but also your success in, thriving in a society that was kind of bent against you. And for that reason, I almost feel like if I built a lowrider, I would be worried that I'm, like, appropriating. But at the same time, like, they're just so fucking cool.
And and what you're doing is throwing a nod to something that you respect. And
sure, I'm sure there's, like, a right way to do it. And really the only in-person experience I've had with lowriders is my friend Skylar had a Regal for a very short time. It was almost finished. He bought it in Cincinnati, and it was, like, missing the rear glass or something like that, but it already had hydraulics. It had, like, the purple metal flake paint, the chain steering wheel, and shit like that, and it's on, like, 13-inch wires. And I got to hit switches in a parking lot.
Nice. And
it was impossible to look tough and cool because it was, like, the most, like, childish fun I've ever had. I'm just grinning like an idiot and just, like, bouncing the front of the car up and down. And I was like, man, this is cool.
Not the most practical car.
Oh, your kidneys would bleed just like driving it down the road for a day and wheeling. That's, maybe part of the reason that they exist so much in South Central LA is because A, that's where those communities are, and B, like, the roads probably don't totally suck there. Yeah,
and you're probably driving around the same neighborhood, so a long trip across town might be a couple miles, whereas nothing around here is. I could imagine taking Blaine Barton Road with the lowrider.
No, they do lowrider cruises every Friday night in Boyle Heights in LA, and I have some family out there, and Greg Vargo, who's in town right now.
I met Greg.
He has an apartment out there, and I have, like, an open invitation basically that I'm going to cash in on soon, where I just go out there for a weekend and once again, this might sound stupid, but more than half the reason I went to Australia was, chasing car culture. And I've been to LA a couple times, but this trip, like, a big purpose of that will be I want to see lowriders, like, not in a museum. I want to see them, like, on the streets doing their thing.
In mass.
Yeah. I want to talk to the people that built them. Like, they're painting murals of their parents on the trunk lid, or putting loved ones' names that died, down the side of the car, and they engrave the wheels and the brake calipers and stuff like that. And just I think 10,000 hours would be like the low end of
Yeah.
what some of these cars undergo to finish, where nothing is left untouched.
Yeah, they literally every single part has been
If
customized.
if you like crawled underneath the car, it would look cleaner and nicer than anything I own from the outside.
Right. That, and that kind of alluded to the fact that I really want to buy that van. When I was a kid, there was a book at the library, and it had probably 20 different custom vans. And of course, before the internet, and I probably checked that out of the library 6 or 7 times. And I mean, I like the over the top ridiculousness of it, the shag carpeting and the mini chandelier, and the mirrors everywhere, and the home stereo system, and back in the day, van culture was huge, and they still have those van rallies. They're not nearly as.
I was told it's coming back. Like
Oh.
there's a certain, like a small kind of resurgence in that, and I don't, I've seen those like. Probably if nobody understands like van culture or whatever, just watch Edward Scissorhands. Like there was one in that, and that was like Winona Ryder's boyfriend's like big thing was like he wanted to talk Edward into robbing this place so he'd get money for a van where he'd do like the crazy mural down the side.
Yeah.
And have a place to hook up with your girl because you still live at home. But
It was the when you talk about a palette to or blank canvas to build something on, what better than just a basic panel van where
you just have this big slab side to put whatever crazy thing that you
and
want.
then you have
on
all
it.
this space on the inside. And I was always fascinated when I would look at the pictures of the interiors, because of course the way they photographed them, they made them look bigger than they are anything. They fit all that into the back of a van.
If you see it in person, it's really cramped.
Yeah, it's really cramped, and it's and there's a certain amount of cheese to it. But I think there is a way to do an updated version of the custom van where it's kind of a modern take on it, where it's
The best custom van I've ever seen is a '60s Econoline, and it's called Van Gogh. And the guy uses it to promote his business, but the entire interior is wood. And
Nice.
he does like digital prints and artwork, and the inside of the van is set up with drawers and stuff so that he could carry this like 40 by 70 poster without folding it and come out of this drawer. But the outside of the van is nothing but like the scallops and stripes, and it's insane the amount of work that went into this thing. And those are vehicles back then that people were throwing away, because it'd be like the Comcast van today.
Yeah.
Who gives a shit about that thing?
Right.
It's just this weird white free candy van or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that Van Gogh is really, 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 really sick. I always liked how they had like the motor basically in between the driver and the passenger, because the front end's really flat, and you are actually sitting kind of in front of the front wheels.
Yeah, the cab over.
So it would be a really an interesting driving experience.
My cousin had one for a while, and he said, "Yeah, your left foot rests on the back of the headlight."
Yeah.
And that is kind of a unique.
To quote the father of this girl I used to date who had those vans, he said, "You're the first one at the scene of the crash."
That's right. You're definitely up front and close, and you have that nice hot motor right next to you humming along. But there is.
It'd be great in the wintertime.
Yeah, and I just think where every Honda looks like every Toyota, looks like every Kia, and more, it's not even cars, it's SUVs everywhere. That a really cool panel van. Just from the standpoint that I just want to see one going down the road. If I almost kind of like with your drift events, if I have to build one just so that someone would have them. Same with, and even to that extent with custom motorcycles, you don't see that many of them anymore. There's not this is not a big area for bobbers and choppers. And
It's kind of incredible that Scott Anderson exists in Wheeling.
Yeah.
And some of the work that he's put out, and him and Nick Paracelia specifically have been really, really formative for me as far as like opening my eyes to. Nick was always really into mini trucks, and he's built some insane ones in the past before he got into drifting, but also he kind of shares the enthusiasm for lowriders, and there's not like an aspect of car culture that Scott probably hasn't at least touched on, if not spent $8,000 on at one point. You know, he had a drift car, and then he had a Monte Carlo on air suspension, and he's gotten really into like traditional style 60s and 70s choppers and bobbers.
Yeah.
And his skill level since he first started messing with this stuff has just progressed massively. And, you know, the paint work that Nick has done for these bikes is, I think there are probably 3 to 5 custom choppers cruising around Wheeling.
Yeah.
Tony Provenzano, who he's a tattoo artist at Greg's, he has this wild ass, you know, very 70s style long front end with like the narrow handlebars and the crazy sissy bar on the back. It was actually featured in Pittsburgh Moto magazine, I think. You'll see him like every weekend just cruising around, and then Hunter Norman and I think Shelton Shia might have sold his bike, but they were all like very traditional styled bobbers and choppers. And you know, 10 years ago that did not exist here. Motorcyclists in Wheeling were guys in their 50s on big dresser Harleys.
Yeah.
And there's a place for that, I guess, if that's what you're into. But as far as like the no bolt unturned or unchanged kind of custom bike, like that's had a pretty good following here. And I don't know, Wheeling's kind of amazing as far as like there's a little pocket of everything here if you know where to look.
Yeah.
Because on the, you know, at first glance you would almost think, oh, this is just like small town America, and you know, there's 8 restaurants or something where you get the same food at each one. There's not like a lot of variety, but in terms of like cultures and interests, if you know where to look here, there's at least one guy into it.
Yeah. And
or girl.
And doing it at a very high level.
Yeah, I mean, that's been amazing. You know, Scott started out just like building an exhaust for like the brand new Harley that he bought, and then I actually delivered a bike to Columbus for him where he just like, he changed the guy's turn signals and you know, built him some pipes and some stuff like that. And then all of a sudden it progressed to he makes his own frames.
And he makes his own 5-spoke chopper wheels. And I mean, it's in fact I had a friend in town, and we stopped down to see Scott. I hadn't seen him in a while, to check on the progress of the bike that I bought off you, which, you know, it's still a work in progress. He said, well, you got to fire the guy. And I said, hell no, this guy's an artist. And every now and then he'll work on a little bit. And when he does, every time I stop down, he's done a little bit of something different. And it's subtle, but really cool. And he's had some bikes on the lift, and I said, I could take the bike home and put it together from where it is now, and it'll be worth about what I have into it. But if I just am patient, when he's ready to finish it, it's going to be a work of art. And it'll actually, I kind of figure when the bike's done, I'm going to get rid of my love seat and keep it in the living room, because it's going to be that nice of a bike. And
I felt that way about, like, if I build a dirt bike over the winter time, I want to go so far with it, and you don't realize it, but there's a lot of room for customization on a dirt bike without making it like unrideable.
Yeah.
I would just, you know, park it right over there. But yes, between Scott, like his skill level in terms of building these bikes, and then Nick is capable of those wild paint jobs, like the fish scale, and, you know, making it look like there's water droplets on the car, or doing, you know, the traditional lace stuff.
Yeah. See, that's the stuff that I want to eventually get into.
And I mean, those are guys that grew up with each other, but it's wild that that exists in a town of,
Yeah.
what are there, 28,000 people or something here?
Yeah.
So it's really easy to get into that mentality of like, oh, I'll just buy stuff off the shelf and put together this thing.
Yeah.
But if you look around, like, there's guys that can make you something that doesn't otherwise exist.
That's kind of like, why I like doing the podcast is to, I'd love to get Scott on the podcast, although I think he's enjoys talking about that stuff when I come to the shop, as far as formally talking about it on podcasts.
He actually called while we were doing this, so I think today he's riding these 70s go-karts that he put together that they run like alcohol and they're super fast.
Yeah, I've seen them at the shop there. The last time I was there, they're very cool.
Yeah, I rode it before. It was insane, and it was fast then, and now it's on alcohol, and he rides it at the Wheeling Park High School parking lot, just to get into it. And he's got a daughter now who she's gonna, inherit a whole world of like, Dad's building me a mini bike or a go-kart or something like that. And
what I like about that guy is he's got a lot of talent, but he's also really curious and not afraid to try new things. And he has a lot of the work he does on old equipment that he's rescued from a factory, and then he watched a tutorial for hours and hours to learn how to use whatever piece of equipment.
Yeah, he logs a lot of hours on YouTube, and he's got some old, probably 60s lathes in there.
Yeah.
And then because there's a resurgence in the interest, like, there are some new tools in there that probably 12 years ago you couldn't buy new. And now, like, maybe somebody like Eastwood or something makes this like English wheel. He's got like the only time I'd ever seen one of those before was on the Discovery Channel when they were doing those like custom
Biker
chopper shows. So yeah, between if you were building a custom bike, Scott could build you the frame, and then Smitty Lou Amos could build you the motor, and then Nick could paint it, and then you would have like I don't know anywhere else.
Yeah, and for a population this small, like he had an old BSA in there that the piston was seized on the bottom. And for people that don't know about engines and stuff like this, maybe it won't make sense. But when the piston's seized on the bottom, it's a pain in the ass, and
most people throw it away.
They throw it away, and it's an old BSA from the '60s, and it's a small bike,
which is a British company that doesn't exist anymore.
And I said, how do you get a bike how do you even think about getting a bike like that running again when it's because what? First of all, he put oil in there and put a heater, and he got the piston loosened up, but he said, there's only so many ball bearings, and thing is, if you couldn't find a carburetor for it, he could machine and fabricate
just
some
make
kind of a converter plate and fit another. That level of ability is why, however long it takes for him to finish the bike that I bought off of you, is how long it'll take. But I'm gonna have him finish the bike, because when it's done, there won't be, there's nobody else that I can take it to get come close to what the guy can do with it. And as long as the bike's in the shop, it gives me an excuse to go down there.
Sure.
And I walk in there, and to me that's like a 10-year-old going into Toys R Us.
Yeah, and I mean, part of the territory that comes with doing a shop like that in Wheeling is that he also has to take those bullshit like rust patch jobs on old pickup trucks, or put I think he's worked on 3 different trucks for Jensen Landscaping where he's just putting a clutch in it and just doing stuff that generally like other people don't want to deal with. And sometimes to make ends like from month to month, I guess when you're building custom choppers in a small town like that, those are the types of things you have to do. But it was nice to, nobody makes anything for the RX-7 to make it easier to drift. So I take it to Scott and I say, cut my steering knuckles and re-weld them so that I have more angle, and he was able to do that. And
and you have a high level of confidence that he's going to do it well.
Sure.
And that's,
I know his welds are going to hold, basically. We have this handful of people in this town that are relatively young and very skilled at this stuff. Even, AJ doesn't necessarily fabricate stuff, but he's a encyclopedia of knowledge about, Chevy stuff, and he's about to swap his second truck. He put essentially a poor man's Corvette motor into a little old S10 before, and
Nice.
we embarrassed a lot of people on a straight stretch of road with that thing, and then finally the truck rusted out, and now he's just building something bigger and better. And this town has like a lot of very capable people like that.
Yeah, I hope to get more and more into the culture of bikes and cars and stuff as I'm transitioning my career here, and hopefully if I get better and better at the paint, because that's always been what I've gravitated to more than the mechanical, that'll help me get.
It's definitely something. Scott complained the other day that people just don't do anything anymore as far as getting together. So that's definitely something where, similar to the parties at Later Gator, it would be nice to start regularly getting these people in the same parking lot, and swapping ideas and showing what they've worked on. So,
because I don't go to car shows anymore, because I don't want to see another blue 65 Camaro and another red 68 Mustang and a black Chevelle. I'd love to have one of them cars in my garage. I'd love to have an old GTO Judge.
Yeah, but trust and believe I would just drive it all the time like it was a normal car, because that's what they're for.
Yeah. But to go to a car show and see 6 or 7 of them all in a row that are maybe, other than being a different color, they're either stock or they have Kragers. And
I don't care.
There's nothing unique and interesting about those. So to get people that have that same aesthetic where they like cool and unusual and different stuff that kind of break the rules. If you ever have a mind to want to organize anything like that, I'm on board. I'll bend over backwards to make that happen, just because that's one of those kind of things that I would want to attend.
Just to get the attendance to be decent, you would have to put, in this town, you'd have to put a show together or a meet together that was just all inclusive, from drift car guys to the custom bikes to
everything.
What else is there? There's not really any traditional hot rods or customs in this town so much, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
But I guess I would just include everything that's like
saw
drastically customized.
I saw a highboy drag car out at Barnesville, and that was pretty impressive.
Like a gasser?
Yeah, gasser, and where they run the pipes under the front wheel wells, and there's a fair
Those
amount
are
of
awesome.
rat rods. Some of them crappy, some of them nice, but I would love to see an event like that take place, because it is a interesting culture.
It would be nice to have it just be very, very informal.
Yeah.
And just everybody gets together, and there's no awards, there's no judging.
Yeah.
You
It's more
just
just hang out.
You get to just swap ideas with people and get people excited, because I've seen people's faces where they normally would not get exposed to this sort of thing. Like, we took a lot of guys who their backgrounds were maybe like mud trucks or like off-roading and stuff like that. We took them to a drift event years ago, and they had a blast, just like, oh wow, this is like a thing that exists. And getting to watch it or get into the car or something like that. And if I met somebody that had built a traditional lowrider, like, I'd have 4 hours of questioning.
Yeah, right.
And customs are just as cool to me. The lead sleds with the chopped roofs and channeled bodies and stuff like that. That's like a bucket list vehicle for me. Not necessarily a 51 Mercury, but like something built in that lead sled style, with air suspension, and it's not necessarily fast, but it looks way cool. It's comfortable on the inside, and nothing's been untouched.
Yeah. Radically redesign the car. Well, you mentioned mini trucks. I remember when those were huge. I'd still love to have like an old Courier.
Yeah, I think that was like an 80s phenomenon that was huge then, and they went crazy. Nick would be the person to talk to about those, but we were in high school. He built like a 80s or like maybe a 91 or something like that, Mazda B2000.
Nice.
And he had a custom airbrushed paint job that he did where he made it look like the truck was made out of like metal patch panels, like on a almost like an old destroyer ship or something like that. And he made it look like the rivets were rusting, like dripping down. And I never got to see it really up close, but I saw it in pictures and stuff like that. And I mean, everything had been done on it. And
and there's really no part of car culture that I like the big lifted trucks, and I know a lot of people kind of they're not, especially the older guys, they don't really care for the imports. But what I try to remind them is, when we were growing up, the cars that were 20 years old were the old Camaros and stuff like that. Now, if a kid wants an old car that they inherit from their parents, it is a Honda Accord.
Right.
It is a Civic. It's an old Mazda. That to them is
those cars,
the cheap old car that they have to customize. Right. And so
the cars that they're excited about now, the old guys, the baby boomers, technically, that they grew up into, are $20,000 on the low end for us, and we're just not going to touch those. And to that extent, a lot of my friends have $20,000 or more into making a drift car work, but that was not like the initial cost of the car.
Right. Brandon, I didn't say anything to him, but I noticed him, St. Clairsville, the guy that has the 240, and I think he has like the front end was like zip tied on at one point, and it was all, it wasn't made to look nice, but when I looked inside of it and I saw the big brake handle and everything, I knew what it was immediately. And to me, that was, of all the cars that were sitting out here that day, that was my favorite one, because it just looked like it was 100% made for purpose, and aesthetics were
kind of sidelined,
which is an aesthetic in itself, and I really liked it. Well, buddy, we've gone 2 hours and 15 minutes, and we could probably talk about cars all day, but I kind of like to take a peek at that Lexus. Is it in the garage?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to do that. Hey, everybody, thanks for listening. I had fun. It was finally, I think this is the first time I've had a chance to do anything that was car and bike related, which is crazy because it is one of my favorite things in the world, and I hope that we do more of these and maybe get some of these dudes that that I don't know, that like I'd love to have AJ on, and some of the other guys that you mentioned, maybe even get Scott to come on and talk about what he does.
Yeah, those guys could tell you really specific techniques or experiences, and maybe AJ would disclose some of the racing kills that we've had. I feel like those are his stories because it's his truck and he built it, but we've definitely struck a little humility into some people that thought they had fast cars. So
that'd be fun. All right, hey buddy, man, thanks for coming on. I know it was short notice. I messaged you early in the week, and I'm sure I'll have you on again. And everybody, thanks for listening, and until the next time, see ya.
Peace.
This is a journey into sound. Would you join me, please, in welcoming
Redeemer full of culture. Get it.
I got so much trouble on my mind. Refuse to lose. Here's your ticket. Hear the drummer get wicked. The crew to you to push the back the black attack. So I sack and jab and slack the Mac. Now I'm ready to mic it. Hear my favoritism, Rolo. Never be a brother like me, go solo. Laser, Anastasia, major. Ways to blaze your brain and train you. The way I'm living, forgiving what I'm giving up. X on the flex, giving now. I don't know about later. As for now, I know how to avoid the paranoid. Man, I'm headed up to here. Yeah, I wear, got 'em going in fear. Rhetoric said and read just a bit ago. And not quick to go sign the hard rammer. in the better days. Raw, metaphysically bold, never follow the code. Still drop the load, never question what I am, God knows. Cause it's coming from the heart. What I got, better get some, get on up. Hustler of culture, snake bitten, been spitting the face. But the rhymes keep fitting, respect's been given, how's you living? Now I can't protect a paid off defect. Check the record and record, intentional wreck. Played off as some intellect, made the call, took the fall, broke the laws. Not my fault that they're falling off. Known as fair and square throughout my years. So I growl at the living foul. Black to the bone, my home is your home. But welcome to the Terror Dome. Come on, who put this thing together, huh? Me, that's who I trust, me. Would you join me, please, and welcome me? Subordinate terror kicking off an era, for delivering pain. My 98 was 87 on the record, yo. So now go Bronco.
Oh, Joe, they out to get us, man. Joe, they out to get us, man. Yo, we gotta go keep boys off.
Crucifixion ain't no fiction. So-called chosen, frozen, apology made to whoever pleases. Still, he got me like Jesus. I'd rather sing, bring, think, reminisce about a brother while I'm in sync. Every brother ain't a brother, cause a color just as well could be undercover. Backstab, grab the flag from the back of the lab, told the rap, get off the rag. Sad to say, I got sold down the river. Still some quiver when I deliver. Never to say I never knew I had a clue. Word was heard plus hard on the boulevard. Lies, scandalizing, basing. Streets of hate who celebrate with Satan. I rope a dope the evil with righteous bobbing and weaving. And let the good get even. Come on down. But welcome to the Terror Dome. Come on down. Come on down. Yo, B.E. 1990 and all that. Holding the race against time, the pit and the pendulum. Check the rhythm and rhymes while I'm bending them. Snakes blowing up the lines of design. Run upon the science, I'm sending them. How to fight the power, cannot run and hide. Well, it shouldn't be suicide. In the game, a fool without the rules. Got a hell of a nerve to just criticize. Every brother ain't a brother, cause a black hand squeezed a Malcolm X the man. The shooting of Huey Newton from the hand of a nigga pulled the trigger. Come on down. Come on down. Would you join me, please, and welcome me in? It's weak to speak and blame somebody else. Will you destroy yourself? First, nothing worse than the mother's pain of a son slain in Bensonhurst. Can't wait for the state to decide the fate. So this jam I dedicate. Places with the racist faces. Example one of many places. Weak in speech. I speak from a lesson learned in Virginia. I don't smile in a line of fire, go wild. But it's on basic drums, even violence. What you do, get your head ready. Instead of getting physically sweaty. When I get mad, I put it down on a pad. Give you something that you never had. Controlling, fear of high rolling. God bless your soul and keep living. Never allowed, kicking it loud, dropping a bomb. Brain game, intellectual Vietnam. Move as a team, never move alone. Well, welcome to the Terror Dome. Come on! Yo, look at you now. You ain't want to listen to me. Now look at you.